So in today's podcast, we'll be talking about shirk, which is idolatry and polytheism. Now, before people switch off, when they hear the word idolatry, they instantly think, naturally everyone does, of worshipping idols and stones and things like this, which is true. But there's a lot more to it, and that's what we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to give three types of shirk, which Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi Islam, the promised Messiah, presents. The first type, which he says, is most people are not involved in that anymore.
Yeah,
idol worship.
of course.
Right? And he says that in this age of logic and rationality, people don't really worship idols.
They've moved away from that.
They've moved away, right?
Yeah.
The second type, he says, a lot of people are engulfed in, and that is overly relying on worldly means, on material means, thinking that something is giving me benefit or something is, causing me harm, and basically taking God out the picture and just relying on worldly means. And we'll get into that.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that. The third is putting God equal to oneself, or even putting oneself greater than God.
So like abilities and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Thinking you're greater than God. But the Prophet Messiah alayhi Islam, he says that most people, a lot of people today, they're not engrossed in idolatry, worshipping an idol, but they're engrossed in over-reliance on worldly means and thinking worldly means are their be-all and end-all.
Yeah.
So, let's go through
I
some
think that's
examples.
pretty self-explanatory. I mean, one quick example that comes to my head, if you fall ill or if something happens to you or your child or your wife or your father, whoever, right? You go to the doctor, they give you medicine, right? So now we have all of these things. So instead of praying, one might naturally fall into a thing where they think that it's the medicine that's healing instead of God, or it's the doctor that's healing instead of God. So that over-reliance on that means instead of God Almighty himself, that is sort of the second type of shirk that we're talking about.
And it's interesting because the Prophet Messiah alayhi Islam says that because there's been so much technological advancements, the Industrial Revolution, so much technology now, and advancements in medicine and other kind of sciences, we see that this type of shirk is increasing. So look, I was just thinking as a very simple example, if you need to go somewhere and you don't know the address, you don't know the way, you just put it into Google Maps, put it into Waze, whatever app you're using, and you're relying on that app, to that navigation app to get you to that point, right? So, and this is just one example. We have that constantly throughout our lives, right? Whether it's just normal technological, like using your computer, or relying on the income you're getting, whatever.
Yeah.
So people now in our modern age, full of materialism, they basically are taking God out the picture and believing that the technology or the advancements that we have in our lives are going to be the solutions to all our problems.
Yeah. So in essence, what's happened is that God has sort of been replaced by these sorts of means.
Exactly.
And now he is no longer needed per se. That's what a lot of people think, right? So for example, even when it comes to like studying for exams or whatever, of course, you do the work as well. In Islam, we're not just told to just pray and just leave it up to God and not do anything. Of course, you try your hardest. But that being said, how many people are there, they tried their hardest and they still end up failing a test?
Yeah, exactly.
How many people are there, they take the exact best medicine, they have the best doctors, and they still that treatment ends up failing. So that just shows that means, they are just that. They're a means. They're not the end. And they're not 100% foolproof. For example, you mentioned a journey. If you're going out on a journey, on, let's say, the Titanic, for example, which was at that time, the person who made it, he said, even God can't sink this. And look at what happened. It sunk. And that was the best thing at that time.
Exactly.
So
you have these examples where, of course, you need to stay attached to God and keep God above all these kind of means. Interestingly, the Prophet Messiah, he gives a very interesting analogy. He says that shirk is so addictive that he compared it to two kind of drugs. So he said that normal sins, everyday sins that people commit, which are sins. I remember that in Islam, shirk is the greatest sin. So normal sins, he compared it to like shisha or hookah, where people can get off it.
Yeah.
Right? However, shirk is such a intense addiction. He compared it to class A drugs, or like things like opium, that they're so addictive that someone cannot get away from it. And you see that in the modern day, that people are so engrossed in just over-reliance on what our technological means, or whatever financial means, whatever that is in terms of each person's life, that they have now taken God out of the picture.
Yeah, he actually mentions, there's a line which I really liked. So to give a bit of context or give an example, so let's say I overly rely on you. You're one of my really good friends, right? And if I know whenever I'm in a hardship, I rely on you, I know I can turn to you and all of these things. But Hazrat Masih Maud, he says that when you overly rely on something, to say that agar ye na hota to main halak ho jata, that if this person or if this thing was non-existent, then I would have been destroyed, or I would have no solution to the problem without this person or this thing. That is the step of over-reliance. Like, yeah, you can obviously ask for help and stuff, but that shows when you rely too much on something where you think that you can't exist without it, then that is stepping into the boundary or stepping into the realms of shirk, basically.
And everyone can see this within our own lives, that there are occasions where we think that, like you were saying, the doctor's going to do it, the therapy or the medicine, that's going to be the cure. And then because that's because we advanced so much in that, you can understand why people are going towards that kind of shirk now as well. So the Prophet also says, he gives 3 examples. So he says, shirk is equal to, number 1, honoring or respecting or holding something in awe more than God, or equal to God. So everyone can think about that in their own lives. Loving something which is equal to God, the love that we should have for God, it's equal to that one thing that we're loving, or it's greater. Or fearing something as well, or fearing someone, right? Which is how we should actually fear God. So we see that in not just personal lives, but socially, internationally as well.
Of course.
That people are fearing others or something else more than they should actually be fearing God, or loving others or something else.
It could be your boss, your manager. You're scared they're gonna demote you, or they're gonna promote you. Therefore, you love them more, or your wife, or your children, or whatever.
Exactly.
It reminds me of a verse in the Quran where Allah the Almighty says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَتَّخِذُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ.
Yeah, exactly.
That there are people who take other than Allah as idols. Nidun means an idol, and they love them more than they love Allah. But those who believe, their love for Allah is greater than anything else. So they still rely on those means, but their love for Allah is always going to be greater. So if that means goes away, the wife, the child, all these things, your job, let's say you get demoted, whatever happens, you lose your job, your love for Allah is always going to be greater. So in actuality, this is the purpose of our life, is to have a relationship with God. And if you have that, then anything else that happens in life, it can't break you down.
One thing is, like you alluded to this earlier on, in Islam, we're not saying that you just pray, right?
Yeah, of course.
The Prophet ﷺ said there's dua and there's dua.
Of course.
So dua is the medicine you take,
Yeah.
right? You have to take that medicine. And then with that, you do the dua, because Allah is the one who's going to put the healing in the medicine. The medicine in itself it's powerless.
Exactly.
But the power comes from Allah.
Exactly.
Right? And so having that, as Muslims living in the modern age, we have to be very conscious of this fact that are we relying on something to the level that we should be relying on God, or are we thinking that this worldly means is benefiting us because, and taking God out the picture, right?
Exactly.
Is it just this worldly means that is giving us the healing or the money or whatever, or is it God influencing those worldly means and then making them a way for His blessings?
Exactly. So there's an amazing thing that I just remembered right now when you were just saying that. It's a really good point. So if we take the example of studies, so we've all done that. We've all studied for exams. We have a great exam coming up. And let's say me and you, we have 2 different ways of studying, right? And we don't know which one's better. Let's say you're a visual learner. I'm more someone who likes to listen to lectures and podcasts or whatever. So I'm trying my best and you're trying your best. But the promised Messiah, ﷺ, he says, ihdina siratal mustaqim, guide us on the right path. When we pray that, there are so many different ways that you can study. But when you pray for God to guide you on the right path, then that's Allah Ta'ala's blessing, that he sort of opens up to you which one is the best for you. Yeah. And that is the quickest and the shortest path. So that's an example of, there are so many different means that you can take. But when you add God into the equation and you pray to Him, then He blesses that, and He blesses your time and your effort, and you are able to find the best and the easiest and the most perfect way.
Great. So they were the three ways. First, idol worship,
Yep.
which most people today, in the age of rationality which we're living in, do not do, which the Prophet Messiah Islam notes. The second is over-reliance on worldly means and making that our God, right? And that's what the Prophet Messiah Islam says, that most people in today's world of technological advancements are engrossed in. And so as Muslims, we need to be very conscious of that and just remember that, yes, we have this technology and different things in our lives which are helping us, but in actual fact, they shouldn't be the be-all and end-all. The reality is that God is the one who's the provider and the sustainer and the healer and everything else.
Yeah, and the third one is very similar to this, where you think of your own abilities as you rely on yourself way more. That you think that the way you can strategize and the way you can, you know,
your skills, your abilities,
exactly,
or your thinking or your planning is equal to God.
And we've seen so much. We don't even need to give any examples where people's strategies have failed. The most smartest people, they've just been completely
whether it's nations as well,
exactly,
and leaders.
Exactly. So that's why you need God in your life.
Yeah. These were the three ways or the three types of shirk that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad has mentioned.
Yeah.